Thanks for joining us again. My name's Andrew Walsh and I'm the CEO at Iress. It's my pleasure to be the host for today's super efficient session entitled Transformation in Action. Joining me today is Mark Puli, who is the CEO of ESSSuper, and also Brian Peters, who is the CEO of the IQ Group. ESSSuper is one of the largest super funds for emergency services and Victorian government employees, and the IQ Group is a consulting and delivery partner to superannuation and wealth management participants. Brian's also an independent technology advisor to the ESSSuper board, so he knows this story and Mark's journey at ESS very, very well. The session today, we're going to discuss the practicalities of leading technology transformation and change, with a focus on the ESS story towards a target operating model underpinned by a digital transformation and also automation, a significant contrast from where ESS's operating model was. And so we hope this session will give you some useful insights, particularly for funds that might be considering the journey to the future. So Mark and Brian, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Hi, thanks for asking.
So Mark, we spoke on Monday about target operating models, and you touched on ESSSuper's journey to an automated super admin model. What was the impetus for that? How did it get started?
Yeah, sure. Good question. Thanks, Andrew. So it's probably best to start with the legacy that we have now, just to give you sort of demonstration of the need for change. So at ESSSuper, we've got 5 instances of Superb, we've got Calibre, we've got Acurity, and what we've done over many years is built around that core offering. So, ESSSuper, we administer 13 defined benefit schemes, as well as an accumulation offering. So we've got it all. So our transformation is like doing transformation 14 times over. And so when we looked at those systems, it was obvious it was end of life. And being end of life, and this is nothing against the team did a wonderful job with sticky tape, glue, staples and nails of holding everything together. But we realised that it was end of life. But then we paused and we said, well, actually, what's core to our business is the operating model. And what is the value that we try to present? So we actually went from a problem to actually, what are we here to do? And we sort of flipped it around. And in doing that, we considered, what is our business? What's our business trying to achieve? Importantly, and we've seen the world change a lot in recent years, and everyone's talking about automation, but where is competitive advantage and what can that look like? And then we looked back at our technology and said, our technology stack is not going to get us to competitive advantage. So that's really where we started. But then we had to go and confirm it. So like all good businesses, you test your theory against your membership or your clients. And we did all this analysis around the cohort, what the members wanted, what our competitors were doing, because you've got to look internally, but you also got to look externally and say, what is best practice? We undertook deep market analysis, and this all takes time. So I don't want any of the audience to think just tomorrow you can flick a switch and it all happens. We restructured the business to be ready for the change, because just going out and putting a new platform in, and I say this, and Brian's heard, and Brian and I have talked about this a lot over the recent years, is you've got to change the mentality of the organisation on how they approach it. So we told staff early what we were going to do, and we brought them on that change journey. And it's not an easy journey, but we've brought them on that. So, understand what your membership wants, your customer wants, understand the market you're competing against, and understand how to bring your staff on that journey. And that's really where we started.
And how long what was that preparation phase, Mark, before the project got underway in earnest?
Look, it took a good 12 months. And the reason it took 12 months, we're very conservative. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, we look after the emergency services in Victoria. We look after teachers in Victoria. Whilst our systems are old, they've been ticking over. And so, we've had our fair share of issues, but the members love us. And so we wanted to really make sure that we chose the right partner, which is the end game. Like, you don't want to choose a partner that you're not comfortable, because, it's a long-term relationship. But really, we started with, what is our purpose and what are we here? And we challenged, the vision of the organisation and the strategy, and we rethought it all. I mean, this is not just a challenge, this was one of the best opportunities. And as I say to the team, we're setting this organisation up for future success for the next 10 years. It's not a 2-minute decision. So you've got to work through it all, because you need that support from your board, from your executive teams, from your staff, to make it a success. And that's where we spent a lot of time, is getting ready for that change.
And Mark, before you got underway and before you started this preparation phase, as CEO of the fund, would you have described operations as efficient? And how was it obvious that there was the digitization and automation needed?
So digitisation was always needed. One of the questions we asked ourselves is, should we just do it ourselves?
Yeah.
And look, the one thing I've learned working across financial services, not just in superannuation, is, and this is a really important message for the smaller funds as well as the bigger funds, is do what you're good at and get someone else to help you, partner with others. And it's not just about investment firms partnering. Choose your strategic partners to help you put your focus where you need it to be, and enable them to help you where their focus and expertise is. So a really important point. And that was a big change for us, because we did all in-house, semi-automated, manual workarounds. That legacy of 30 years on our old systems is now being blown away. And it will result in vastly more efficient processes and benefits, financial benefits, as well as service benefits to all our members.
Yeah, so it's less about automating what you had for where you are. It was really a plan for being future ready.
That's right. And I think the one lesson I would say to all of you out there who are listening to this today is that you can get a shiny new toy, a shiny new system, but if you replicate the old and the new, you are likely to fail. So take the opportunity and go, what is the best way of doing what I do? And you must do that. So it's not just a matter of how do we replicate the old to the new. Think of business differently. And we've seen it all through COVID, Andrew, that, the way we buy, the way we purchase things has changed. In a way, we wish we'd had our project done pre-COVID. I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit later on. But I say, we're really well positioned if there's another COVID outbreak, if there's something else happens. By automating things, we're going to be far more efficient.
Yeah, excellent. And Brian, is Mark's story at ESS unique? Are you seeing similar pathways trod by other funds, or what are you seeing across the market?
Well, Mark is unique. I think I've learned that. Mark's very unique. I guess we see that replicated in pretty much every fund. Every fund is trying to update its response to change, and because of the landscape that they're in, because of the environment that they're in, they all want to simplify their operations, so either through automation or through a range of other things. And that's reg change, or it's speed to market, or it's reduce your cost, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess the thing that other funds have is that they have APRA standing in the room with them when that happens. So that's a little bit of an additional dimension. What there is, though, is a growing appreciation of, and we talked about operating model, there's a growing appreciation of starting with an operating model, and that operating model being connected to strategy. The only problem is, you get 3 people and ask them what an operating model is, chances are you're going to get 3 different answers. You're going to get, it's a platform, it's an org structure, it's a level 1 process diagram or business architecture. So there's that as a complicator, that getting everybody on the same page is, and Mark, I think, has done this very, very well in ESSSuper. And I guess the other 2 things that I would call out there is that there is different levels of knowledge and experience that are sitting in the funds at the moment. We've had a big influx of people from other areas of financial services, and that's great because they bring all sorts of different new approaches and perspectives. But they also, when we get down to the complexity of some of the funds, and Mark's, I think he hasn't cornered the market in complex funds, but he's almost there. That's a great, they sometimes struggle with that. And therefore it's difficult to articulate what the future operating model looks like. So having a bit of a navigation to articulate what that future operating model, and of course complicated by mergers and acquisitions as well, and kind of underpinning that is cost to serve, which is the other, probably the major thing that I think, taking your time to really understand this sort of pathway will give you a sense of cost, a sense and details around cost to serve.
Do you think cost to serve is one of the primary goals as funds think about that operating model, or is it a hopeful outcome?
Yeah. No. You shouldn't treat it as an outcome. You actually should treat it as a fundamental understanding of your business, because of the things that may change into the future. We take a balance beam approach. We look at the things that are now that you know on one side of the balance beam, and on the other side of the balance beam, the things that you don't know. And there are so many unknowns for some of the funds in terms of where the growth is going to come from, what merge partners will bring to the table, etc. And you need to reflect that back, obviously, into member experience. But and then you've got the reg outcome, and then you've got the reg overlay, which of course is member outcomes tests.
Yeah. I'll just say, sorry, if I could just add to that, Andrew, I think importantly, so cost is definitely something that the regulators are focusing on, which we'd agree on. I think the other opportunity, it's not just a cost decision for us. The other opportunity is, where do you put people in an organisation? Because we're all member facing, we're all focused on retaining the customer. Is where do you put people where they matter? And I spoke about this a little bit yesterday. Our members told us overwhelmingly that when they need our help and they need to talk face to face, that's what they want. So it is about cost, but it's also about redirecting your effort into things that matter for your membership.
Yeah, it's certainly not automation and no humans. It's actually multi-channel, and how do you segue between those interfaces in the most seamless way? Because that's how everyone's going to consume, at least for difficult decisions. But Brian, you described some complexity around the benefit structures at ESS. Do you see complex benefit design needing something different than simpler design that has much larger scale, or are they similar operating models for what the future needs?
I think the things that trips most people, most funds up at the moment is I guess especially in a merge situation, is the consolidation and the harmonisation of product.
Yeah.
And that's relatively easy in the accum space. Of course, in defined benefits, it becomes really problematic. So I guess there's two things I would say to that. In terms of the decisions that funds make in terms of in-source versus outsource versus hybrid, that's an overarching decision. But really it comes down to, and I like your phrase, Mark, where are we going to put our people that have the greatest value and the impact? And where is the parity side of that? In terms of what we do and the processes that we automate, et cetera. So understanding that is key. Where you draw the line, either on an in-source arrangement or an outsource arrangement or a hybrid arrangement, is really key to where you end up.
We've spoken about operating models, spoken about automation, digitization, and we all know well the regulatory burden. To what extent is being future ready for even more regulatory change central to the way that you've automated, Mark? Is that been central to that design, and how important?
Yeah, look, it is. I mean, we're regulated by the Victorian government, but we apply all APRA standards. So for everyone on this call, we face the same scrutiny as you, except we get it through the Department of Treasury rather than APRA. So I think importantly, regulation has taught us, and in fact, Royal Commission, I mentioned this yesterday, but Royal Commission, we saw how many errors have been made, and we all know that wherever you've got human interaction, there's a chance of errors being made. And I think having state-of-the-art systems, state-of-the-art ways that you can access data on your systems can help you manage that better. And so, we've got enough new regulatory rules and regimes coming out that, we're swamped with regulation. But if you can make some of the things that you get regulated on easier to deal with, it means you can focus on other important things. So, administration systems to us are very important at the moment because they're old, they're clunky, end of life, errors are made. We want to move away from that and say, where do we need to focus on the regulatory things that matter? And base administration, there's an expectation now that it just happens. We've seen that through banks. We've seen it through other financial institutions. You see it through, your telephone providers. You see it through your health insurers. We've got to catch up, and it does feel like we're a long way behind. So I do see automation helps really a good tick for the regulator. And we've got standards about outsourcing which we have to comply with, but that's a lot easier than fixing problems that you've made because of human error.
Yeah, and Brian, automation equals less risk?
Well, no, not necessarily, because automation if you're just taking a pure form of automation, yes, it does, but it's never implemented in a pure form. I guess one of the biggest risks is where automation is implemented and it's implemented in such a way as the organisation itself, so the customer organisation, doesn't change its operation to embrace that technology. Often during the journey that we had with Mark and ESSSuper was the question of, well, if Dorothy's upload of a form fails, well, who does she call? Whose contact centre do they call? And if they are calling a particular contact centre, they're owning the customer experience at that point. But you also need to value this parity versus value question. You don't want to own the wrong customer experience. You want to own the valuable customer experience. So it's about making that cultural change in terms of expertise and giving people the skills and experience to be able to have a higher order management of the automated platform.
And Brian, how are you seeing funds approach the very, very relevant topic of cloud infrastructure when they think about what future operating models look like? It has to be central to everyone's thinking from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody is thinking, because once you start to divorce yourself and say sounds terrible, but it's not about the registry system. It's actually about all of the other, the customer differentiation layer and customer experience layer. Then you start to think, well, what do I want to own? What do I want on premise? What do I want to be responsible for? To take Mark's point again as well. What are we good at? Yeah. And what should we stick to?
Yeah, and all of those things, if you're delivering a personalized, differentiated customer experience, they all need to hang together and they all need to be synonymous with each other, so that it's automated. Yeah, and so Mark, back to ESS, I'd love to describe it, and I'm sure you would, that projects are smooth sailing, but we knew that wasn't going to be the case when we embarked on that. But what are some of the biggest challenges that have been encountered as you've gone through this transformation journey?
Sure. So I think importantly, a mindset shift by the organisation, because we've been brilliant at looking after members for all these years and gluing things together. So shifting that mindset to say, there's others that can do this better than us. For starters, I think is a little bit humbling for the organisation. I think importantly, shifting the mindset to not just do what you used to do anymore. And I don't know how many times Brian and I have spoken about this, but changing the system, if you don't change the way you think about it, you're going to end up really with a new version of your old system.
Yeah.
And you can't afford to do that. I think the other thing is making sure when you enter a partnership that there should be open and clear debate. You know, don't bury anything, put it on the table. And that ability to walk in each other's shoes is fundamentally important as well. You know, you've got to understand it. Companies are all different. Their value set, the way they operate, what they bring to the table is all different. And you've got to actually be able to say, well, if I was them, how would I think about it? And I think importantly, the key message I'd say is, if you've got this vision, you've got to embed it in the organisation, and you've got to communicate it not once, not twice, probably about 20,000 times, Brian. I think you've seen that in your journey with us. Is you've got to keep reminding everyone what the end vision is. And I think that's really important. You know, 30 years of systems, we can do everything. We've got 30 years of nuance in our systems. Some things you've actually got to stop doing. You know, some of the bespoke things we've uncovered, even though we did a fundamental review of every transaction that we did, we've gone, oh, do we still do that? I'm sure funds stopped doing that 30 years ago. And so sometimes you've actually got to just let go. And, you know, ensuring that your staff are brave enough and encouraging them to be brave enough is really important.
Yeah, and people are an important part of this. Some of the team that was at ESS has moved across to work at Iress, and that it's been a really positive partnership, and we've been very open in talking about that between both organisations. But how have the people that were heavily involved in the administration at ESS, how have they responded to what transformation is, Mark?
Sure. So probably answer that in a couple of ways. So firstly, they've responded very well. And, you know, there's no bones about it. There's a challenge for each individual involved in this. You know, questions like, do I have a role in the future? What could that look like? You know, am I ready to retire? Am I ready to do something else? You know, run a coffee shop. And there's not many coffee shops left in Melbourne at the moment, as we know. So, you know, being open and transparent, and we were open and transparent day one. And we've told staff right along that journey, when every go, no-go decision, because there's a lot of, you know, hurdles that we have to hit, we've explained it to them. So bringing them on that journey is really important. And, you know, we've made a lot of structural change to get ready for it, because you don't do it day one when you go live. You've got to start making those changes, getting the jigsaw puzzle right before you go live. But, you know, our staff engagement scores have gone up. Now, maybe part of that's because people don't have to come into the office with COVID. But one thing, if you asked any staff member, we've been very clear with them. The other thing is what opportunities are available to people either in the new world, and Andrew, you mentioned about some of our staff moving across Iress. We've got some wonderful people that work for us, wonderful people. Making it clear what opportunities are available in the new world. In many cases, what we've done is, as staff have left, because you get a natural turnover level, we've replaced with contractors to protect the core. And some people want to move on. How do we support them do that? So I think you've got to be really open and transparent with communications. And that's the only way you can bring staff on such a fundamental change. But also linking it back to your vision, which is, we're here to support the members. This is going to be the best way we can support our members. And it's hard for people saying, well, I've supported them for 30 years. But they, you know, they tend to understand, and not everyone, but the vast majority get it. And our job is to constantly sell that and communicate and explain where we're up to.
Yeah, so one other thing. Sorry,
Andrew,
Brian.
The other thing, Andrew, I'd say at the other end of that is education and communication at the board level. We're seeing that the successful transitions and transformations that we're involved in are the ones that put time, especially if there's a merge involved, put time into the education of the board, because most of the time the board members won't have the background in superannuation operations. They certainly probably won't have the background in technology, and that's changing so dramatically. So that education, bringing people along in a learning way, right throughout the organisation, but let's not forget the board, because having the board on message is probably as important.
Absolutely. And I want to come back and talk about change management in a moment. But one of the things that we had to learn pretty quickly, Mark, was how to do this complicated transformation while remote. And we had lots of plans around co-location and how teams would work, and that obviously very effective. And we dreamed about that potential, but everyone was at home, and Iress and ESS had different in-office permissions, and so we had to balance through that. But how would you see the impact of COVID? How did you see the impact of COVID through this?
Well, the good thing is we've got the base case of, we started pre-COVID and then we hit COVID. So we've actually seen both sides of it. So it's pretty easy to form a view on what happened. I would say to you that the best time we had working together was when we had people working co-located. And so, we set up floor space in our building here, and, I saw when I walked down there, the banter and the debate and the discussion, and it was quite lively. I go, that's a good thing. So the irony is whilst you want to try and automate whatever you're wanting to automate, just using automated tools to do it is not the answer. You actually need people to be on the phone, to be face-to-face, to read people's faces and responses, because then you actually uncover issues and problem solve together. So, look, the teams did work really well through the COVID period, even though they were all remote. We were remote, you were remote, Andrew. But I think importantly, they were in constant communication. But it is easier when you're actually face-to-face in an office environment. People can say, oh, come and have a look at this. What do you think? Whereas when you're sharing a screen, it's sort of just almost one-dimensional. It's a lot harder. But, the advantage is hopefully soon we can start returning to the office. But you know what? The teams, I've got to give it to them for resilience. They got through it, and it's been a long haul. But you know what? It builds a deeper understanding of what we're actually building, because you are learning remotely. And so when the teams come together, I think it's going to be wonderful, and we're looking forward to it.
We are. Brian, change management's a topic that lots of people talk about, and it can risk being a bit cliche, but it needs to be central to the planning of a project. And how do you what advice would you have for funds to get it right?
At a highest level, I would say that any change management in anything of a sizable nature needs to plan to change, because these things take a long period of time. It is highly likely that circumstances in the BAU world of the business or in the fund will change dramatically. And that can be driven out of technology, it can be driven out of mergers, it could be driven out of product, it could be driven out of the regulator. So that's the first thing. It needs to be open weave enough to accommodate change. And taking Mark's experience, having strong reporting of the program's fundamentals is fundamental to change, because only then can you make good decisions about shifting emphasis or shifting direction, etc. And then the second thing I would say from a change management perspective, in a more traditional change management, is to not be afraid of the C word, the culture word. We tend to think of culture as a product of getting a whole lot of people together and them working efficiently, etc., etc. You need to do work on culture, because if it is a highly automated new world, if it is a highly agile world, if we're going to need to deliver into an administrator differently, if we're going to be able to deliver and change product differently, then you need a culture that embraces that. So my advice would be, don't skimp on the things that are changing the culture, and identifying those things that are actually going to be positive incentives to change the culture. And of course, the other stuff is get everybody on board and change champions and senior buy-in and all of that good stuff. But they're the two things I think standing out for us as we go through a number of these things at the moment.
And those things don't happen overnight, that's for sure.
No, and you actually need to do the work to understand them first. So it's almost like anything. You need to understand the as is before you know how to change it to the to be.
Yeah. So culture is one of the success factors for successful change, Brian. What other things might be ingredients there?
I mean, we touched on before about reporting. The other things I would say kind of go to what makes a successful transition, and what makes a successful transition or a transformation is a good set of design principles that are linked to the strategies that are known. And if you don't know the strategies, that's okay, but let's link them to the ones that we know and be open to change them as we go through. So linking those design principles, and then that can cascade down into understanding a set of capabilities in the organization that is going to drive those changes. Understanding that capability lens of the organization makes change a whole lot easier, because you know what you're building inside, you know what you're building outside, you know what the skill gaps are, etc.
Yeah, and milestones tend to track progress, and then there is success. Do you think there's a risk of treating success like one thing? Like there are different aspects of success. It might be getting to the base of the mountain and then climbing beyond it. But there are measures of success, aren't there, when we think about that?
Yeah, look,
yes.
I think, yeah. Sorry, Brian, you go first.
No, well, all I was going to say was yes, but there needs to be a recognition that if milestones are changing, it absolutely shouldn't be, because that's one-dimensional. If milestones are changing, why are they changing? What does this new success landscape look like?
Yeah.
That's the key thing. That's the key thing. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I think you've always got to keep your eye on the prize. And, you know, success, I mean, you've got to be resilient, you've got to be forceful, and you've got to really drive for success, because what success means for different people, and you know, there might be alignment on the vision, but how you execute it and what it actually means, you know, it's like peeling off the layers of an onion. And you've got to get to the core of what success means, and because everyone interprets success differently.
So, Mark, what's the ultimate success of this whole transformation for ESSSuper? How do you measure that?
You know, we're aiming to be the most digitally progressive super fund in the country. So we've got this vision of success, and you know, we see the registry as, and everyone's put layers around the core over time. We go, if we can replace that core and then leverage our layers and build new layers. So this is not the end of the journey for us. This is a multi-year journey to, and you know, we talk about it all the time, is make a difference where it matters with people and automate the rest. And, you know, there's some little niggly bits, and I noticed, you know, one of the questions coming through, it's hard. And success, to be successful, there needs to be hard work. Nothing comes easy, because if it was easy, everyone would do it, and then you look like everybody else. So I think you've got to pull the sleeves up and work hard.
Yeah, and
sorry, Andrew,
sorry, Brian.
The other thing I would put to that is, more and more, the changes that you make through the transition need to have strong traceability. And we're seeing this in remediation programs that we're involved in, et cetera, et cetera. So the decisions that you make through a transition or a transformation need to have a traceable back, traceable and be documented. There needs to be breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
What was interesting, Mark, that you're describing that there is future success, and so getting to the end of this transformation, if you like, is the starting position for the future. It's not actually the destination, the ultimate destination. And so I think that thinking about what is the enabling transformation so that you can continue on a path, and choosing that operating model such that it allows you continue to innovate, personalise for members, digitise, and change is pretty critical.
Yeah, and I think, Andrew, that as long as 5 years from now, we're always asking the question, how can we do things better? Embedding that into the staff. And I'll tell you a very quick story. But I went to one of our call centres. So we've got an in-house call centre, and I go, that to me is people facing. I know it's on the phone, but it's people facing. I went to one of their team meetings, and they said to me, "Oh, Mark, I've got this person, all they're doing is responding to faxes." And I went, "You're kidding me? We've still got faxes?" They said, "Do you reckon you can help us out and get rid of faxes?" So we employed a third-year undergraduate student, brought him in for 3 weeks. He went through every document and removed the fax number. And what we first got was, members are going to complain because there's no more faxes. Well, we removed it all. I went back proudly to the member service centre and said, "Oh, look, isn't this great? We've removed faxes. Are you getting any?" And they said, no, we're not. And then I went back to my desk and I looked at my business card and I had a fax number. So I say, the change in 5 years' time is coming from your people. And you want them to always say, is there a better way of doing it? Not we've always done it because, it keeps the members happy.
And Mark, people that have questions, please feel free to shoot them through. We have one question here from Christine about what reflections that you might have on things that didn't go well, where you needed to lead a change in approach during the transformation. So something that wasn't working that you needed to pivot around. Is there anything that?
Sure. So I'm more than happy to go there. So I would say, I'll give you one thing that's working first. I always like to start with a nice positive. So the one thing we did, and I think it's an important note for all of you on this seminar today, is that we cleaned up as much as we could. So transferring dirty old stuff to a new system is not going to work. Now, that's been great. And I think, UAT, we've got a 95% acceptance rate, which is phenomenal, right? And that's on both sides. But guess what? We found stuff that we didn't know. We found errors, we found mistakes, we found problems. So I would say to you that if you've checked twice, go and check a third time. And, these sort of red herrings, to be fair, they haven't derailed our project. They've just caused us, some anxiety and some delays and some deferment. But gee whiz, I'm glad we cleaned up the systems first. I think the other thing I would say is bring in experts to help you. So Brian, you can probably cover your ears now for a minute. Bring in experts to help you because they live and breathe it every day. And you may know what you currently do really well, but bringing in experts to help you think about what may unravel. And, we had risk treatment plans, we had all the right things in place, but getting them to challenge you, and this is where Brian and my journey started together, going, no, go and think about this problem. It's always good to have someone else in the room to give you insight into what others do and other problems that they've seen, because then that helps you avoid them. And I wish I brought in more experts, would be my comment.
And how far into it are you, Mark? What outcomes have you seen already, and what overall methodology was used as part of this transformation? Question from Jackie here.
Yeah, sure. So from a tech perspective, we've built pretty close to 1,000 business rules. That's how complicated we are. So where are we up to now? Well, last week we had a very important meeting with Iress. So many of you, or you all know, that when you make fundamental change, you've got to issue something called a significant event notice, which is basically writing to your whole membership and telling them of the changes that are happening. And you've got to do that sufficiently in advance. And in our case, because we've got our own call centre, we didn't want the call centre blowing up with significant event notices. Not that we get many calls about significant event notices, but you never know. And so we sat with Iress last week, and it sort of comes a little bit back to Brian's point. We have got a massive checklist of everything that reconciles from contract, transactions, who's doing what, joint, retained, outsourced, whether the processes have been built. So you've got to have all of that in place. We're at the stage now, we're on Thursday night. We issued a notice to the board and to all staff to say we are issuing the significant event notice. So we are really close. Now we're still in UAT, and you never know what UAT will bring up. but we are that confident that we will go live in the first quarter of next year. There's going to be a migration phase, which is going to be a lot of work, but we are very, very confident that we are ready now to be in a position to go live in the first quarter of next year. So we're really excited and we're pumped about it.
Heading towards it. And Mark, there's lots of discussion over the kind of delivery methodology that gets used by different organisations, and it throws things into a new discussion when two organisations come together. But how did that work? We're an agile organisation, and we had to work out how to work together through that process. And so, how would you describe that?
So, yeah, culturally, our organisations, in terms of their approach, Agile versus Waterfall, we're very different. And we've had 30 years of we just do whatever we want whenever we want, right? And so it's in many ways it's easy to pull the levers, but the levers you're pulling may not be the right levers. So there's that sort of balance between the two. I think having open and honest conversations is paramount, and understanding up front the ways you work and the way you're going to work together. It's funny, you don't fully appreciate it until you look back at it. You never really know what's going to happen in the future until you're there. So being able to have honest, open conversations about what's working at both sides, fundamentally important. Often I've spoken to Jeff about saying, well, no, we're going to be the digitally most progressive fund. What are we going to have to stop? And, Jeff might ring me up and go, oh, your people are still talking about doing this. And I go, no. That's not what we're going to do. So I think that sort of, and equally, when we had a few issues with at the Iress end, when we go, no, we need this. This is something that we cannot give up on. Having those debates, don't defer them, have them early, because it means that you can then solve them earlier, move on earlier, and get close to completion earlier. So really important to have those open and honest conversations. And
there are compromises during all of that as to what the benefits are, or benefits lost. So, well, people can die in a ditch over that stuff, Andrew. And you go, some of it, like some of the things we've compromised on, some of the things Iress have compromised on, it actually gets you in the end a better model, because often the compromises are things that you probably don't 100% need. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess,
Brian.
Oh, just finally, I guess this issue of day two harmonisation of delivery methodologies is really critical with whoever the service providers are that you're considering, because if you don't get it right, I mean, you're in a good situation. You're agile, and Mark's hammering down a digital journey which will force agility into his organisation. The reverse can be the case as well. Service providers can be waterfall or sometimes glacial in terms of their changes. So day two delivery harmonisation is critical.
Yeah, and I think that, just back to Brian's earlier point, because Brian, I think that's a really important point. We did not make the significant event notice decision lightly. So we know what's going to be day two, and there's not a lot of it. We agreed that with Iress up front. So I'd always say to you, again, open conversations, agree it. And I can't tell you how much work's gone into this, and Brian's been on that journey for a long time with us now. But knowing what you're getting with no surprises when you go live, because there will be things that happen. Right? We all know that. But reducing that as much as possible is really, really important.
Well, appreciate the questions that have come from the audience today, and I think they've been great to stimulate further conversation. Thank you both, Mark and Brian, for being part of the discussion. There are lots of great insights as well as practicalities, and just getting a deeper understanding of what it's been like for Mark at ESS through this transformation. Appreciate the time, both of you. So there are a number of other sessions that are occurring today as well as tomorrow. So please check out the agenda and get along to as many as you can. We hope they're interesting and helpful. We'll also be making this session available to watch on demand over the next 24 hours via the Event Hub that you'll have received notifications about. Thanks again, Mark, Brian, and thanks everyone for questions, and appreciate everyone for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.